Welcome to Unit 6, The Future of Literacies and Learning in a Digital Culture. In this, our last unit of the course, we're going to consider what literacies and learning will look like in the future. In fact, maybe, as many argue, the future has already arrived. How do we connect the issues of literacy in the past to today? What will literacy look like in the future? As Deborah Brandt has said, there's no shortage of literacy around. We have a lot of print. And it is getting more accessible. But does this lead to more democracy, as is the promise of literacy? Does it lead to greater equality? Are all these literacies, these different forms of print and text, equally valued? Certainly, as we move from a print culture to a digital culture, digital literacies are becoming very important in our lives. But what is digital literacy? And how is a digital culture changing how we learn? These are ideas we're going to explore in this unit. Let's define digital literacy. According to Jones, Cavaliere, and Flanagan, digital literacy includes the ability to read and interpret media. Media being text, sound, images, to reproduce and create data and images through digital manipulation, and to evaluate and apply knowledge gained from digital environments. They feel the most critical of these is the ability to make educated judgments about what we find online. In which of these literacies do you feel confident? Which require for you more learning or mentorship? Are you able to evaluate and apply new knowledge from digital settings? Or are you sometimes really unsure if something that you read online is actually true? Can you create online texts using multimedia, print, as well as images and sound, and combinations of these? Often, we're very good at consuming text, but we're not very good at creating it. In a 21st century or digital literacy world, people argue that it's important to be creators as well as consumers, critical consumers of content. Let's explore this a little more. Maybe you remember this old boring type of video screen from distance education classes you may have taken in the past. We call this kind of text Web 1.0, or the reading web. In the Web 1.0 world, online or internet texts were a way to share information from one person or institution to many. In other words, for someone to get information out to a large audience. Basically, it was text put up on a screen. As in this old version of a distance education course, you really just read online what you could read on a print-based page. You were passive. You were just there as the reader. And there were a limited number of people who could produce these texts because you needed to have HTML, a specialized language, in order to create web content. So, only a few people could be producers of texts, although many people were meant to be passive consumers. It was the internet, but it looks very different to how we're using the internet today. Welcome to the world of Web 2.0, or what is called the read-write web. In the reading-writing web, content is created by many people for many people. In other words, one person or institution isn't in control of what is always written or the form that the content will finally take. And in order to create content on the web, we no longer need specialized technical knowledge. The emphasis on the quality of the content and the design of the texts. But these days, most of us are able to write something or post an image or sound. In this way, the low technological knowledge means that more and more people are creating more and more texts, and the power of literacy is therefore shared in more hands. In the Web 2.0 world, users initiate content. You don't only have to read what is sent to you, you can decide what to read, and you can create content that changes, adds to, enhances, and even challenges the work of others. You become an active participant in reading and writing on the web. The Web 2.0 is also different from the 1.0 world because there are social sharing options. Usually on most websites today, there's some kind of interface in which you can send a comment, respond to something, put up a photograph, and so on. These social sharing options also link to social networking options, where you can extend and create conversations with other people who you may know or whom you don't. The theory is that all these interactions, all this new content on the web, is really important to creating new knowledge and ideas. The world of Web 2.0 is also non-linear. Remember the text in 1.0. It was just a straight old regular text. But often now when you go to a website, you'll notice the text is non-linear. You don't necessarily read from the top to the bottom or the left to the right. Hyperlinks are guiding the way we read in really important ways. Think how these are changing texts. We can take a side trip into a topic and then come back to the main text with new knowledge and information. Sometimes we never find our way back to the first text, and we go down our own journey. In this way, texts are becoming composites, intertextual. In other words, there are now new relationships between texts, and we can flit or read or skim to another. This changes in very important ways the way that we read. In Web 2.0, there are also more opportunities for what is called scaffolded practice. In other words, people with different skills on the web can learn from each other. Have you ever taken a course on how to do Facebook? Have you ever taken a course on posting ideas or contributing to a blog or making a text message? These are all skills that we've learned on our own with each other. In this way, Web 2.0 is also changing learning and making schools, while important, different in terms of their role. We're not so reliant on teachers and instructors to acquire new literacies. A final feature of Web 2.0 that we'll consider here is the fact that when we can create content on the web, we do so for an authentic audience. In other words, we learn to read and write differently, depending on the different audiences who may be reading our work. We write a Facebook message in a different way than we might design a blog post or a wiki. And so we're also developing skills in how to use language differently in different settings, a very important literacy practice. Let's have a look now at more deeply at some of the theories behind Web 2.0. According to some of the learning theories, people are able to produce rather than be consumers of content. This is an important shift in the power relationships between teachers and learners. People are also more able now to construct knowledge collaboratively, what is called crowd wisdom, by Stephen Downes. Crowd wisdom is the idea behind his connectivist theory of learning, that when we source ideas or wisdom, knowledge from many, many people, we learn faster, we solve problems more quickly, and knowledge actually becomes more reliable the more people that participate. This is a new version of learning. It used to be that we relied upon one or two very wise men to inform us and educate us. Certainly it's important to listen to and to access the ideas of wise people. But in the connectivist theory, we can also appreciate the ways in which crowds, in a way that all of us together can create wisdom too. Within this learning theory, the meanings of literacy are expanding to include multimodal meaning making, in that text and print is important, but not the only thing that's important now. Taking a really good picture, making a really great audio recording, linking the images with the audio recording, and so on. Designing a website to attract people and enhance learning. These are all really important literacy skills that are not print-based. More, they are design-based. And so we are moving into a world where design literacies are becoming just as important as print literacies. The idea, then, that we create knowledge together is also connected to another theory called social constructivism. Some of you will have encountered this if you've ever studied Vygotsky. From a social constructivist perspective, social interaction leads to knowledge creation. In addition, critical, creative, and collaborative literacies are considered those that are most important in today's world. Here, creativity and problem solving are vital, as is the capacity to choose and use information carefully. Many believe that what we need more than ever in today's world are people who can be critical about the information we receive, who can ask really good questions about texts instead of just accepting the spin as it is. We need people who can create knowledge in many forms and share knowledge with others. We need new knowledge, not just the same knowledge from the same dominant groups. Importantly, Web 2.0 and creative and collaborative literacies can help us access the knowledge of people who might be marginalized and who haven't had a voice in the past. Thirdly, we need to be able to collaborate with others on the web. In other words, a world where knowledge and skills are distributed openly rather than protected, where we collaborate together rather than protecting or isolating ourselves. This is the thinking behind open source software, and also the thinking behind WikiLeaks, among other open knowledge movements. Let's have a look now at social media literacies. Social media literacies are strongly connected to Web 2.0. Some people argue that they are powerful new ways of making meaning, a powerful new literacy. Others argue that social media is a waste of time. What do you think? Certainly, new digital literacies and new ways of learning are posing challenges and problems. Are we ready as a society for the explosion of social media? Do we know how to use the media to its full benefit? Do we know how to avoid the pitfalls, such as vigilantism, bullying, inaccuracies? Think of the recent Stanley Cup riot and the role of social media, not only in perhaps creating a context where a riot could happen, but also creating a context in which some innocent people were accused of crimes they didn't commit, and others were socially shamed. Is this the way we want to use social media? What are the literacies attached to the effective use of social media? This is the topic of Reingold's article, one of the core readings for this unit. So let's explore a little bit what he has to say. According to Reingold, there are different kinds of social media literacies. Attention literacies is his first. What he wants to ask is, can we really all be multitaskers? Can you really be texting and following the lecture and listening to or creating a Facebook message or reading your Facebook while you're in the lecture? You might think you can, but it's really up to you to think about it. Can you be a multitasker when it comes to using digital media? What pulls us away from one idea and into another? Do you flit from one thing and forget what you're doing? Can we control our attention through awareness of how we are using our cell phones or Facebook? Is it okay to pull out a cell phone and start texting in the middle of a dinner in a restaurant? Are we okay with that? Or do we need to kind of maybe consider some new social mores or norms about how and when social media can be used? What happens when you give up texting or Facebooking for a day? Was it really difficult? Did you feel you were missing out on something? Are you using your digital tools to their most powerful possibilities? That's what Reingold wants us to consider. Another form of social media literacies is participation. What Reingold means by participation literacies is, what does it mean to participate in social media? Are we happy to be passive, or do we contribute ideas? Do we use the resources of the net to make the world a better place? To source crowd wisdom and solve problems? Or do we play crazy birds for hours and hours on end? What does it mean to participate on the web from a civic society perspective, from being a citizen, from contributing to democracy? These are questions we need to ask ourselves as web-based or Web 2.0 and social media literacies are becoming increasingly important. These are the places now where some of the most important conversations in our society are happening. So the question is, who's participating in these and who isn't? And how are we participating? A third social media literacy is collaboration, and we've just spoken about this in the previous slides. How do we work with others in a virtual environment? Do we know how to share tasks, how to include others, when it's time to lead or follow? Do we use language in a way that is supportive and effective? Do we sit and watch others do the work? Collaboration, in the idea of collaborating to create knowledge, is a very important tool in a society that needs all the help it can get to solve the problems of our world. So how we collaborate, whether we're the kinds of people who take over or the kinds of people who can work well and share ideas, is a really important new form of literacy. A fourth form of literacy is network awareness. By this, Reingold means being network literate, knowing how social networks function. This is deeply tied to social capital. In other words, who you're connected to and what those connections or networks bring into your life. Different kinds of networks will afford different kinds of learning. So to be network literate, you need to know where your information is going and how it gets there. You need to know how to reach out to some networks and avoid others. This means knowing how to write for different audiences, as we discussed above. But it also means knowing very carefully how the internet works. The fifth literacy is critical consumption. In this form of literacy, what Reingold also defines as crap detection or critical information literacy, knowledge authority is no longer vested in the person who writes the text. The authority to decide if this is valuable knowledge is vested in the consumer of the text, you. You decide who or what is reliable and what knowledge is credible. In other words, it used to be that just because something was written in a book and bound with a very authoritative, intelligent-looking person on the back cover, that this knowledge was credible. In the world of the internet, where there's information flying everywhere, we need to really take a step back and ask ourselves how we decide what is reliable and what is credible. How do you know what to trust? Is the result of a Google search the best knowledge out there? Or does it represent someone's success in tapping into the search algorithm? Information may be easier to find, but much of what is on the web may be false. It might be a misrepresentation. It might be spin or biased. It might even be embedded in a hate group. So critical consumption literacies, information literacy, is really important to develop and pay attention to. And in fact, the SFU library has many courses on this and many resources. Librarians are excellent. They are masters at critical information literacy. So if you're wondering about this, I recommend you go and visit them. What we're getting to now then is the idea that there are different kinds of digital literacies. We can be passive or we can be active on the web. We can collaborate or we can maybe cause trouble. We can commit ourselves to creating knowledge and content, or just passively reading our Facebook pages. We can't therefore assume that just because we can turn on the computer or click our way around Facebook and so on, that we are digitally literate. Victoria Carrington has done some research on children's literacy and children's websites that are designed to attract children. She argues that if you visit the Barbie.com site or other virtual consumer sites, usually designed for children, you will notice that not much in the way of cognitive or critical thinking is required of you. This is what Victoria Carrington calls literacy light, kind of like Diet Coke or Coke Light. Sites like this, indeed any social networking site linked to consumption, often emphasizes gender and class differences in ways that are very unproblematic. They do not require any creative content. In other words, when you visit this site, and I suggest you do just for fun, you'll notice that there's not really any demands on you to write anything, to contribute your ideas in any meaningful way. You may notice that what's required of you is like clicking literacy. You're asked just to click boxes as a means of registering your participation. Is this enough? Is this what we might call being digitally literate? This is why, in one of the core articles of the unit today, there's the argument that different web-based interfaces have different opportunities and demands upon your literacy skills and knowledge. If you can update a Facebook status, is this the same as being able to mobilize Facebook toward a social or political movement? How are the practices and knowledge required different? What Reingold asks us to consider is how we are digitally literate, not just if we are literate or not. So now we come to a page which represents what might be called Web 2.0, a page that invites the sharing and the creation of knowledge. Here, we're invited to be critical about the kinds of information that we read. We're invited to share a story, and by this, not just to click, but to upload a digital story. In other words, we're being asked to be creative, and we're being asked to share these ideas with others, to be collaborative. So here, you'll notice that the extent to which sites invite critical, creative, and collaborative literacies is also the extent to which the content is very rich and interesting, and also more reliable. Because don't forget, in the ethic or the logic of crowd wisdom, the more people who contribute to an idea, the more accurate or the more reliable that idea might be. But again, you have to use your critical information literacies to make decisions about this for yourself. So, to conclude, let's move a little bit beyond the idea of digital literacies. Regardless of the tools we use for thinking, whether it's digital, whether it's a pen, a paper, a brush, paint, ink, the cuneiform wedges we visited in Unit 2, we need to be critically aware of how we use these tools, to what ends and to what consequences. What are the consequences of digital learning and digital tools in our society? Think about this as you take the bus home, or spend some time in a restaurant or down a street somewhere in the Lower Mainland. How are people using digital tools, and how is it contributing or shaping our society? Learning, real learning, does not have to be digitally mediated to be rich and rewarding, or even to be considered 21st century learning. Digital devices can be distractions, or they can be powerful resources. It depends on how we use them. Even if you are born into digital literacies, can you use them for the important 3 C's? Critical thinking, creation of text, and collaboration? In this way, and what I hope you've gained from this course and this unit, is some critical reflection on what it means to be literate. That literacy is not about illiteracy or full literacy, or people who are smarter or more intelligent or less intelligent than others. I hope what you've taken away is a more critical reflection on yourself as a learner and as an educator, and the ways in which we all have responsibility and power to distribute the powerful literacy resources in our society more equally.